Plankton, they have some serious misconceptions about what plankton are. Typically, people think that plankton are teeny tiny little animals that get eaten by whales. Okay? While that's true, that is a very, very narrow view of plankton. Plankton are so much more than that. Okay? The reality is that plankton are both plants and animals. So you have plants and animals that are plankton. And you have 3 characteristics that you have to have in order to be considered to be a plankton. Number 1, you have to be alive. Okay, so in our definition or qualification of being alive, bless you, you have to do respiration and reproduction, right? So you have to be alive. Otherwise, you're dead, and you're called detritus now. You're dead stuff. You have to be alive, and you have to drift, okay? Which means, or you can swim weakly. But basically, the whole idea behind this is if you get caught in a current, there's no way that you can swim against the current. So you can't fight against it and go your own direction. You get carried with the current wherever you go. Okay? So you're alive, you drift, and then you float. Okay? Floating typically means for us like at the surface, so you float up near the surface. But you can also float at a depth. Okay, so you have plankton that float like deeper in the ocean. All right, so they're just kind of like chilling, hanging out deeper in the ocean, and if there's a current, it goes with the current. All right, alive, drift, float. Those are the only 3 qualifications that you need to have in order to be considered a plankton. Do you see anything about the size of plankton up here? This is a plankton. This is the largest jellyfish in the ocean. This is the Arctic lion's mane jelly. You can see the picture, like the comparison between that jellyfish and the person, yeah? See that? That's a plankton. It's alive. It can swim weakly, but if it gets caught in a current, it's going with the current. So it drifts and it floats. So it's plankton. Okay? This is a 450-pound jelly with a 6-foot across bell. And it's plankton. Yes. So, plankton. Doesn't matter what size, as long as it's alive or drifts or floats, it will be plankton. Okay? So Arctic lion's mane jelly, the largest that they've ever found, it was an 8-foot across bell. So the bell was 8 feet across, and its tentacles were 120 feet long. So longer than a blue whale were its tentacles. It's huge. Okay, so we take our plankton, and we group it into 2 groups based on its nutrition. So how does it get its energy? So you have phytoplankton, which are plants that live in the ocean, and then you have zooplankton, which are animals, because you go to the zoo to see animals, right? So zooplankton. So phytoplankton, plants, zooplankton, animals. Characteristics of phytoplankton. They're autotrophs, primary producers, do photosynthesis, make their own food. Okay? Plants. So their source of energy comes from the sunlight, and they do photosynthesis. They're going to need things like carbon dioxide and water, as well as nitrogen and phosphorus in order to be able to do that, okay, to do photosynthesis. And then you can see your little review of photosynthesis right there. So they take carbon dioxide and water to make glucose, sugar, energy, and oxygen. All right? Okay. In order for phytoplankton to be able to do photosynthesis, they have to have certain pigments that allow for them to capture the sunlight, the energy from the sunlight, to drive that photosynthetic reaction. So they have pigments to gather light for photosynthesis. Phytoplankton are a little bit different from land plants, though. So land plants, when you look at a plant, you'll see like the leaves are the part of the plant that's green, right? So chlorophyll, which is the main light collector for photosynthesis, looks green. Okay, so in land plants, that chlorophyll only occurs in the leaves. Okay, so only the leaves on land plants can do photosynthesis. Whereas, like in phytoplankton and also in seaweed and algae, that chlorophyll is located throughout the entire thing. So the entire body of that phytoplankton or algae can do photosynthesis. Okay, it doesn't matter where it is on the plant. It will do it. So only on the leaves and land plants, all throughout in phytoplankton and algae. So chlorophyll is the main light collector. But you'll also have accessory pigments that will collect different wavelengths of light in order to help them to do photosynthesis. And the main reason for that, to have accessory pigments, is to reduce competition for light. And I will explain what that is in just a second. Okay, but the point is to collect and reduce competition for light. All right. Here's how this works. You guys remember back to like 7th grade science, the visible spectrum, Roy G. Biv? Okay. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Yeah? Okay. So visible light, those are the wavelengths of light that are going to be used for photosynthesis. Okay, that's what the plants collect in order to do photosynthesis. Different wavelengths of light will actually penetrate to different depths in the water. Okay, because water absorbs light. Okay, so red light. Okay, so here's our red light right here. Okay, it gets absorbed first. So it only goes, a few feet into the water before the water has absorbed all wavelengths of red light. Okay, blue penetrates the deepest. That's why the ocean looks blue, because the blue is able to go the deepest into the water. So the blue is the last to be filtered out, to be absorbed. So if you have a pigment that can absorb blue light, you can live deeper in the water than you can if you have a pigment that absorbs red light, right? If you have a pigment that absorbs red light, you have to live up here near the surface where there's red light. But if you have a pigment that absorbs blue light, you can live deeper, which means that different phytoplankton can live at different depths, and they reduce their competition for sunlight. Does that make sense? Okay. So it helps to absorb light for photosynthesis. Okay. So this picture that you're seeing right now, this is a pigment absorption spectra. So this is a picture that represents which colors of light a pigment is absorbing to use for photosynthesis and which it is reflecting or not using. Okay, so when you see something, so like when I see Harrison's green sweatshirt right now, okay, what's happening is the dye that's in his sweatshirt is absorbing all of the colors of light except for green, and then it reflects the green back to my eyes, and my eyes pick up the color green. Okay, so his pigment and his dye in his sweatshirt is absorbing all of those colors of light other than green. All right, the pigments that do photosynthesis do the same thing as well. So chlorophyll, okay, which is the pigment that all things that do photosynthesis have, it absorbs all colors of light except for green. It reflects the green back, and that's why plants look green. Okay, so here's our little picture here. Here you have the wavelengths, the colors of light at the bottom, okay, and then the amount of them that is absorbed at the side. Okay, and so you've got two different types of chlorophyll, okay, which are represented by two different lines here. So let's look at chlorophyll A, okay, the dark green line. So the high points on the graph, okay, represent that color of light is being absorbed. So chlorophyll A is absorbing like the blue and the purple range, right? The low points represent the colors that are being reflected, or these are the colors that are not being used for photosynthesis, the ones that you see. Okay, and then if you keep following the line, so it reflects like green and some yellow, and then it absorbs the red and the orange. Do you see that? Okay, so those chlorophyll A is using those colors of light for photosynthesis and reflecting the green, which is why it looks green. Chlorophyll B, pretty much the same. See that? Carotenoids, which is the yellow line right here, that is an accessory pigment, okay, another pigment that can be used to help to capture light. Notice what colors it's absorbing. It's absorbing lots of the purple, okay, and lots of the blue, but it's reflecting like a lot, and it absorbs some green too. But it's reflecting like the yellow and red and orange. See that? So when in the fall, when trees start to lose their leaves, right, and the trees change colors, what's happening is the trees stop producing chlorophyll, and so the chlorophyll disappears, and what you see are the accessory pigments coming through. They look yellow and red, right, because they're absorbing the other colors of light, and reflecting the yellow and the red. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so here's your notes for this. So the color that is used for photosynthesis is the color that's absorbed. Those are going to be the high points on the graph. Okay, the chlorophylls will use blue and red. Okay, and the carotenoids use the blue. And then the colors that you see, those are the ones that are reflected. Those are the low points. Okay, chlorophylls reflect green, and the carotenoids reflect yellow, orange, and red. So that's why, like, I noticed driving home yesterday that some of the leaves are starting to change, and they're starting to turn yellow and red and stuff. Chlorophyll's leaving, and you're seeing the accessory pigments. All right? Okay, so phytoplankton. Why do we even care about phytoplankton? Well, here's like the two major reasons why phytoplankton are actually important. And you're actually alive right now because of them. Two reasons. Number one, most of the food chains in the ocean occur and start with phytoplankton. So without phytoplankton, life in the ocean doesn't exist. Number two, most of the oxygen that you're breathing right now is because of phytoplankton. Yeah, 70% of the oxygen that you breathe comes from phytoplankton. You're like, wait, save the rainforest, right? Rainforests are what give us all our oxygen. And yes, we should save the rainforest, but here's why we actually get more oxygen from our phytoplankton than from our trees and plants on land. So, you produce oxygen when you do photosynthesis, right? That's one of the byproducts. And plants only have chlorophyll, which does photosynthesis in their leaves. So in a deciduous forest, okay, during the spring and the summer, when the trees have their leaves, they can do photosynthesis and produce oxygen, right? But in the fall and the winter, when they lose their leaves, are they doing photosynthesis then? No, which means that they're not producing oxygen during the winter, okay? Whereas in a like an evergreen forest, coniferous forest, they don't lose their leaves, okay, during the winter because they're like the little pine needles, okay, but they get covered with snow, so some of the sunlight gets blocked, and the sunlight is less intense, so they're going to be doing less photosynthesis. So that means that they produce less oxygen. Here's what the difference between spring and winter looks like in the ocean. Is there any difference? Phytoplankton do photosynthesis year-round. Also, 70% of the Earth, 71% of the Earth is covered by the oceans. So it makes up the most of the surface of the Earth, and it can do photosynthesis year-round. 8 for 70% of